continue our family series supporting educators and school family partnerships, as well as families themselves. And today we want to share a resource about Indigenous principles of education that, again, are useful for whether you are, having conversations. We're always constantly teaching and learning, right? And so having conversations at home as well as in the educational space, or if you're a family member wanting to advocate for some of these principles in the school space, want to share a resource that comes from a group out of British website where this came from. But these are the First Peoples Principles of Learning. And I just want to kind of talk through them here. So learning ultimately supports the well-being of the self, family, community, land, spirits, and ancestors. So just thinking about centering well-being in our kids' learning journeys, and again, thinking from an advocacy perspective, is this happening in our schools, right? And how are we designing learning opportunities at home and in conversation with our kiddos around that centers this? Learning is holistic, reflexive, reflective, experiential, and relational. I love this piece, particularly around families, right? Because we are rooted in a sense of place where we live together with our families. Maybe our families are physically in different places. Where is that sense of place? And what does that do to a person being out of that place? We have these reciprocal relationships with each family member in our group as a whole. Learning involves recognizing the consequences of one's actions. We are constantly in conflict with ones that we love, at least in my experience, right? And just being able to learn how to do that well, right? To recognize consequences of one's actions, particularly in proximity with ones we love, often feels easier, more motivating, like a better learning experience ultimately than trying to do this in community with people we don't know or love or trust. So families, I just think, are a natural place for this. Learning involves generational roles and responsibilities. So this idea of intergenerational learning, again, families and many families have like 3 generations, right? Living in, if not in the same building or shared space, living close together or having community and families that are well connected, even if across devices. But this idea that intergenerational learning is important. It is a core component and principle of education. Learning recognizes the role of Indigenous knowledge. If you are not representative of the Indigenous communities, if your family doesn't have that heritage and that history with the Indigenous folks of the land you occupy, like reach out, learn more, read books, connect with authors, connect with local organizations, existing members of the nation to learn more. Learning is embedded in memory, history, and story. So recognizing that it's not just about looking at historical sources divorced from human memory and human story and oral storytelling, and really emphasizing the importance of collectivist traditions like oral histories, encouraging kids to do that. And again, advocating for educational spaces to embed these ways of knowing and learning. Learning involves patience and time. Again, I'm thinking about the patience that we have for our kids as they learn, and sometimes that wanes. And also, education systems are so, in an attempt to be standardized, in an attempt perhaps to support a lot of learning, right? We have things like pacing guides that are very constraining and do not encourage patience and time. And sometimes we as family members need to advocate for this principle to be more present in our kids' experience of schooling. Learning requires exploration of one's identity, right? How can we talk to our kids and invite curiosity and exploration and sharing around their multiple identities and intersecting identities? And how can we advocate for kids to experience this at school as well? And finally, learning involves recognizing that some knowledge is sacred and only shared with permission and or in certain situations. First Nations Education Steering Committee, again, out of British Columbia in Canada, has tons of resources. Encourage you to go there. We'll link directly to their page so you can see what else they have. But just thinking about how we can honor these principles and embody these principles at home and also advocate for them at school.